do my top 5 most disappointing reads of 2019. This list isn't necessarily going to be books that made it onto my least favorite reads. They are books that just did not live up to my expectations, and I just didn't enjoy reading them as much as I hoped I would. The first book of this is The Age of Misadventure by Judy Lee, or Judy Lay, I'm not sure how to say it. It wasn't even like this one was a terrible book. Just with what was on the synopsis on the back of the book, what I read was not what I was expecting. And if I had known that that was the story I was picking up, I probably wouldn't have read it. It was a short book, so I plowed through, and there were parts that I really did enjoy. I wasn't crazy about the ending, and I wasn't crazy about certain paths that the plot took. That being said, like, it's not a terrible book. It wasn't what I was expecting, and I just didn't enjoy what I was reading as much as I had expected to. My second most disappointing read of 2019 is going to be a little bit, I'm sure, surprising to some of you because I know how well loved this book is. It's The Poppy Wars by R.F. Kuang. It had all of the elements for me to love it. It was high fantasy. It had a really interesting lore background it was drawing from and history background it was drawing from. It had a fantasy school setting. All of these things are things I enjoy. I just didn't enjoy this iteration of it. Specifically, I enjoyed the main character while she was in school and she was learning about her world, about her abilities, about just everything. I loved the school setting, but as soon as we left the school setting, I found parts of her character got way more inconsistent and way less enjoyable in my opinion. Although I loved the side characters, and those are what are going to make me go back and read the second book because I want to see what happens to them, I'm not going to be picking up this book to find out what happens to her. And that is a little upsetting and disappointing to me because I was really ready to be really invested in her character. The third book is The Star Is My Destination by Alfred Bester. This is probably my least favorite book that I read this year. Like, just entirely my least favorite book. I am not a fan of the motivators in this. I don't care for the kind of story plot where the man becomes what he hates the most. And that's something that happens in this book. And I really couldn't connect to the main character because of this, and I really just could not get behind his motivations. And as such, I was so close to putting this book down so many times, but I forced myself to read it because it's a classic. And honestly, I would love to have some of that time back because, in my opinion, the book was not worth it. So it was easily both my least favorite read and my most disappointing read because classic sci-fi is usually so often well-loved, and this just... My fourth most disappointing read this year was The Descendant of the Crane by Joan He. I actually did enjoy most of this book. However, the reason I'm putting it on my disappointing reads list is because I didn't really care for her naivete over the course of the book. I found her naivete just didn't flow well with the rest of the book and what was going on and what she was trying to do. It's not like it was just written differently than, say, the naivety of the main character in The Shadow of the Fox, which I thought was pretty well done. I can't necessarily put my finger on what the difference was, but I definitely enjoyed that aspect of the main character in Descent of the Crane a lot less. And then the other thing I found pretty disappointing about this book was the lack of resolution in the ending. Like, I know that not every book has to have perfect resolution in the ending, especially if you're going to make it a series. However, I have seen online that while the author intends to write some companion books, as far as I know, she's not going to write a direct sequel, which kind of saddens me a bit because I feel like that the ending that was written would have been a lot more palatable to me if I knew another book was coming that would complete that storyline. And then finally, my fifth most disappointing read this year was A Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy by Mackenzie Lee. Again, this is another book where overall I actually enjoyed it quite a bit, but there were just, based on how much I enjoyed the first one and how the second one kind of fell together as we got to the end, I became more disappointed with the path it took. I didn't super connect with the main character. I was hoping that she would be a little bit more likable when we were going from her perspective and not her brother's perspective, where you saw her in the first book. But I found her a touch too abrasive to be likable, and that lack of likability and relatability really impacted my ability to connect with her and become invested in her story. And the other thing I was kind of disappointed at was like the grandeur of the role of the fantasy element in this book. In the first book, it was there, but it flowed better with the rest of the story. I felt it was a lot less shoehorned in. And not to say it was necessarily shoehorned in this one, but the fantasy element in this sequel was just not as natural in terms of the rest of the storytelling. That kind of disappointed me a little bit because I thought it had been well done in the first one, and that same general feeling didn't last through to the end of the second book. And that's all I really have to say about my most disappointing reads of the year. Like I said, some of these books, it's not that I didn't like them. I mentioned the ones I did like. It's just there was something about these books that didn't meet up to the expectations I had going in, and they let me down a little bit. And that's all I have to say. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!